What does a Futurefy amplifier look like when the manufacturer ditches the front panel display and in its place puts some capacitive touch buttons so that it can sell for under €1,000 or under $1,000 US? Now, Marantz has answered that question this year with its all-new Model M1. But this is not your granddad's Marantz. Heck, it's not even your dad's Marantz. So today we're going to take a look at the M1 with 4 side-by-side comparisons using music you might read about on Pitchfork, The Quietus and Resident Advisor. So the M1 is a streaming amplifier whose dimensions suggest a Mac Mini that spent 6 months working out in the gym. And the woven mesh top shows us, I think, a novel way of ventilating the internals. And on loudspeaker drive, the M1 offers 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms and I think 125 watts per channel into 4 ohms. But the amplifier inside is a direct digital design. So that means the incoming PCM signal is converted to PWM so that it can directly switch the output devices on the output stage of the amplifier. So there is no sort of traditional DAC stage in the middle. All we have to do is add loudspeakers and put it on a sideboard or tuck it away out of sight because it is, yes, that small. One notable advantage held by this Marantz over similarly spec'd rivals from Bluesound and WiiM is that it's made in Japan. However, on the other hand, when sat next to the Chinese-made competition, the Model M1's streaming support, I think, looks a bit skinny. So it runs Denon's HEOS platform that internalizes Deezer and Tidal and Amazon Music, but no Qobuz. And HEOS also underpins the inclusion of Bluetooth, Spotify Connect and Apple AirPlay too. And AirPlay will hold Roon users over until Roon Ready certification comes out of the oven. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm told it's going to be sometime maybe this year, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, if you can't wait that long, you could use the back panel's 5-volt USB socket to power a WiiM Mini whose Toslink output could then be routed into the back of the Marantz. Or you could pipe Apple Music from an Apple TV, via a TV obviously, into the Model M1's HDMI eARC input. And yes, the Samsung Frames remote control and the Apple TV Silver Wand both work flawlessly with power on and off and volume up and down with that HDMI eARC input. And I single out these streaming workarounds, so Roon in tandem with the TV Remote TV OS app or Apple Music's own TV OS app, because they both put now playing information on the TV to help us care far less about the small Marantz's screenless design, and also care less about HEOS, of which I'm not really much of a fan. It's fine for anyone who's new to streaming, but veterans of Roon or Plex will find its interface comparatively, and I say comparatively, I can't even say it properly, comparatively basic. It's okay. It's fine. When I review streaming gear like this, I usually create a playlist of 10 songs in Tidal so that it can be played out via Tidal Connect and also Roon. And in the case of this Marantz amplifier, there's obviously no Roon Ready, there's no Tidal Connect, so I used Roon to stream that playlist to the M1's AirPlay input. And that's because Roon can stream to any AirPlay device, including now many of the newer HomePods which need to see an AirPlay 2 stream, because Roon's developers recently added AirPlay 2 support to the app. I think it was last Friday or the Friday before. However, AirPlay streaming means we won't get anything higher than CD quality audio, so no high res, but that's just fine by me. So thank you to Roon for sponsoring this video. And my playlist for the M1 review features songs from Morphine, Bodycoo, Onra, Prince, Jimi Hendrix, Photek, Primal Scream, Bob Dylan for the Boomers, the Stone Roses for the Gen Xers like me, and a Burial remix of Block Party, because I'm not really a fan of Block Party, but I am of the remixes. For the M1's operational behaviour, we must pay close attention to the tiny LED tucked away on the bottom lip of the front panel. So flashing white means the Model M1 is starting up, and solid white means the startup process is complete and the unit is ready to rock. And once it's started up and ready to rock, it will show up inside the HEOS app. But beware, flashing amber on the LED means a firmware update is being applied, and the M1 won't show up inside HEOS or Roon or anywhere else for that matter. And I mention all of this because it caught me out upon first starting up the M1. Now, vinyl purists, hello, you should note how the M1's line level analog input, it digitizes all incoming analog signals upon entry. So if that's a no-no for you, this amp isn't for you. And that's because digital domain signal arrival is mandated by the direct digital amplifier circuit, and also the DSP engine that fuels the unit's digital filtering. Now, according to Marantz, that filtering is used by Marantz's sound masters in Japan to voice the amplifier. And Marantz described this voicing as, and I quote, "the characteristic warmth and musicality of any Marantz product." If you know what musicality means, please let us know in the comment section below, because I don't think it means anything other than I like this. DSP also runs the Model M1's tone controls and bass management system when we're hooking up a subwoofer, and both of those are accessible from within the HEOS app. And so with the subwoofer settings, we can choose a low pass frequency for the sub and independently a high pass filter for the main speaker outputs. So that extra flexibility in the sort of sub-bass hinge design has the Marantz one-up the singular crossover point seen within the Bluesound Powernnode's BlueOS app controls. So yeah, it just gives us more power, but I guess also more propensity to make mistakes when integrating a sub, because I'm not an expert in that, and I don't think many people are. It is a challenge, but it can be done with diligence and patience. But I would leave a week for integrating a sub for any pair of two-way stand mounts. That's the way I see it. You might see it differently. But my mentioning the Bluesound Powernode tees up the first side-by-side comparison in this video. So the Powernode is priced within spitting distance of the Marantz. However, instead of using a direct digital amplifier, the Powernode uses a Hypex UCD Class D module with an ESS Labs DAC in the middle, and it gives us 80 watts per channel into 8 ohms, so slightly less than the Marantz. But I wouldn't get too hung up on those numbers, because in my experience, very often, say a 40 watt amp can sound beefier and more powerful than say a 100 watt amp. It's not always true. However, in the case of the M1 versus the Powernode, the Marantz isn't quite as dynamic in the mids and the mid bass when playing Morphine's Buena as the Bluesound is. To me, it sounds more polite in its handling of the song's attack. But the M1 offers a better extended top end than the Powernode to reveal more ambient information on, what is it called? Body coups? I think it's called De Janeiro? Yeah. And that in turn makes for a wider and taller soundstage. And that's especially noticeable on Jimi Hendrix's The Wind Cries Mary. Now, these aren't night and day differences. Nothing is destroying anything else or blowing anything out of the water. That is just preposterous. But these are, yeah, there's still differences that can be remarked upon. That's all I'll say about it, really. They're noticeable, but they're not enormous. For our second side-by-side comparison today, we head south on the spendometer to bypass the Bluesound Powernode Edge in favour of the $300 WiiM AMP, because I think more people want to know about the WiiM AMP than they do about the Powernode Edge. However, if I'm wrong about that, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments. Anyway, we already know that the WiiM matches the Marantz on HDMI ARC connectivity and based managed subwoofer connectivity, but it leapfrogs the Marantz on streaming protocol support. Heck, the WiiM is better spec'd for streaming than even the Bluesound. I think actually the WiiM is the best spec streaming device platform that I think I've ever come across. But I still wanted to hear how much audible daylight sat between the Model M1's direct digital amplifier and the WiiM's, I think it's a TI chip amplifier, that gives us 60 watts per channel into A times, so less than the Marantz. And the answer is that the Marantz offers much greater clarity, better dynamics, and more top-end finesse. I would say the top-end finesse is possibly the greatest difference of those three. And I would also say that there is a bigger delta here than with the Powernode comparison. So I guess you don't get what you don't pay for. Now, heading in the opposite dollar direction, Lyngdorf's TDAI-1120 sells for $2,500 US, so over twice that of the Marantz. And it also gives us 60 watts into 8 ohms, so the same as the WiiM, but it gives us that from a direct digital design, so the same as the Marantz. And so that's our third side-by-side comparison for this video. We got to ask ourselves, how close does Marantz's direct digital sit to Lyngdorf's when we ignore the Dane's Room Perfect software and its broader range of streaming options? And the answer here is the Marantz takes us further. Firstly, the Model M1 offers more dynamic attack, top to bottom. And I think by contrast, the Lyngdorf sounds a bit tepid, a bit weak. Secondly, the Marantz draws more cleanly separated instrumental layers for a more open sound. And then when that's coupled with the greater dynamic attack, we hear how the M1 gives us a more expressive take on music. The Marantz sounds more musically alive than the Lyngdorf. But of course, we buy the Lyngdorf for its room compensation and subwoofer integration automation, really, because it's bloody amazing with that. And we also buy it for its phono stage and because it supports Roon, Tidal Connect and Google Chromecast, which the Marantz just doesn't have. How does the Model M1 compare sound-wise to a similarly priced Class A/B amplifier? Now, I still have the $1,000 50 watt per channel Audiolab 6008 Play here for a fourth and final side-by-side comparison. Now, as regular viewers will know, the Audiolab leans on Play-Fi for streaming, and it also does Spotify Connect, but I would recommend that you add a third-party streamer to the standard 6000A as it uses the same amplifier section as the 6000A Play and the same DAC as well. Now, in this side-by-side comparison, I am once again reminded of the differences between an LED bulb and the more old-fashioned Edison bulb. They both light a room, but they do so in different ways. So the M1 is more lit up in the top end than the Audiolab, but it's also a little leaner sounding. And the 6000A Play, by contrast, tends to soften the transients just a smidge, so they're not quite as keen or as pointy as they are from the Marantz. That said, the Marantz offers better bass control than the Audiolab. And if you're after the best of both worlds, so the best of the Marantz and the best of the Audiolab, you're going to have to drop almost 3 times the cash on the Mytek Brooklyn AMP Plus. And to that, you'd also have to add your own DAC and streamer or a streaming DAC preamplifier. Now, lastly, what about the Sonos amp? Sorry, I don't know, because I don't have one. Just don't have one, and I can only do the comparisons to the gear that I have at the time of, doing the review. I would say that the M1 nicely balances crispness and cleanliness with image or soundstage solidity and punch, but I don't think it's going to steer Class A/B diehards away from their well-worn path. And that's consistent with the messaging coming from the horse's mouth, because when introducing this amplifier, Marantz told me that the Model M1 is not aimed at people who want a Class A/B amplifier sound or the size that comes with it, because usually you're going to need to have a big toroidal inside, which means you're going to need to have full-size casework. As we know, the M1, the Model M1, is for somebody wanting a smaller streaming amplifier that can be tucked away out of sight or sit on a low board for minimal visual intrusion. And I think it looks superb and I think it sounds fantastic, but I do wish its streaming suite was a bit broader. And that is all I have to say about that. So if you like this video, you know what to do. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you like what I do in general. And remember, Patreon is where you can buy me a cup of coffee to say thank you for this video. So drop us a "this video contains 4 side-by-side comparisons" into the comments below to let us know you watched to the very end. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. One notable advantage held by this Marantz over its similarly spec rivals from Bluesound, WiiM, One notable advantage held by this Marantz over, however, on the other hand, when sat next to the Chinese-made competition, and HEOS also Anyway, if you can't wait that long, you could. And the Samsung frames remote control and Apple's When I review streaming gear, I usually create a. And in the case of the Marantz amplifier, there's obviously no Roon ready and AirPlay streaming. However, AirPlay streaming and solid white means the startup process is complete, and we can now. Oh, there's a fly in here. Great. And once it's ready to rock, we will. But mention of the Bluesound Powernode tees up our first side-by-side comparison in the video. But the M1 offers a better extended top end than the Powernode. For our second side-by-side comparison, we head south on the spendometer to bypass. We already know that the WiiM matches the Marantz on HDMI ARC and bass managed. And I'd also say that there is a bigger. And then when of course, we buy the Lyngdorf for its room compensation software and its subware. Of course, we buy the Lyngdorf for its room compensation software. No. Of course, and that tends to. And if you want the best of both worlds, you'll have to drop almost 3 times the cash on Mytek's Brooklyn AMP. So please remember that this review already contains 4 4 side-by-side comparisons to render its glass more full, I guess, than empty.